You begin by noticing that you are here, not rushing, not fixing anything, just here. There is a quiet hum beneath your thoughts, like distant water moving somewhere out of sight. You do not need to look for it. It has always been there. As you settle into this moment, you may feel the simple rise and fall of your breath, warm and unhurried, like light drifting through a window at dusk. Your mind is often described as a tool or a machine or something that must be optimized. Tonight, you are invited to set those ideas down gently, as if placing a heavy bag on the floor. Instead, you imagine your mind as a river, a living river, flowing slowly beneath the surface of awareness. This river does not rush. It does not argue. It simply moves. Each thought that passes through you is like a leaf touching the water, drifting for a moment, then continuing on. Some leaves stay longer. Some disappear quickly. The river remains either way. You do not need to control it. Rivers have been shaping landscapes long before anyone told them how. As your breathing softens, you may notice how the river of your mind responds. Not dramatically, just subtly. When you breathe slowly, the river widens. When you exhale, it smooths its edges. There is a quiet cooperation happening, without instruction. Neuroplasticity is the name science gives to this gentle truth. It simply means that your brain changes as it moves. Like water shaping earth, your mind reshapes itself through experience, attention, and rest. Not through force, not through strain, just through living. You may smile faintly at this idea, or maybe your face remains soft and still. Both are fine. The river does not judge expressions. For a long time, it was believed that the brain became fixed like hardened stone. But stone, too, yields to water eventually. Science has learned what rivers always knew. Movement creates change. Repetition deepens paths. Stillness allows settling. Your brain does not need commands. It responds to what you return to, again and again, like water finding familiar ground. When you practice something gently, the river remembers. When you rest, the river reorganizes itself quietly, without noise. This is not something you need to earn. It is already happening. You may notice your shoulders lowering now, perhaps without deciding to. Muscles often follow the river's lead. There is no rush. The river has all night. Sometimes, when people hear about change, they imagine effort, pushing, striving. Tonight, you are learning something softer. Change can feel like warmth spreading slowly through cold hands. It can feel like a path forming beneath flowing water, not from pressure, but from patience. You do not have to try to rewire your mind. You are already living inside a system designed to adapt. Even now, as you listen, small shifts are occurring. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just quiet alignment. If your thoughts wander, that is not a mistake. Rivers wander. They curve. They loop. They explore. You are not losing focus. You are demonstrating movement. A small part of you may find this amusing. The mind trying to relax by trying very hard. That is okay. Even that effort dissolves eventually, like foam settling back into water. You return again to the image of the river. It flows through varied terrain, sometimes narrow, sometimes wide, sometimes shallow enough to see the stones beneath, sometimes deep enough to reflect only sky. Your experiences are the landscape, not obstacles, not enemies, just ground the river learns from. Neurons in your brain connect the same way rivers do. When a path is used often, it becomes smoother. When it is left alone, it gently fades. No drama, no punishment, just change responding to attention. This is why learning does not always feel like learning. Sometimes it feels like familiarity arriving quietly, a sense of ease where there was once uncertainty. That is the river smoothing its banks. You breathe in slowly now, as if drawing warmth inward. You breathe out, letting the breath drift away on its own. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. Rivers do not worry about timelines. Even the parts of your mind you wish were different are still part of the flow. They are bends that formed for reasons that made sense at the time. And bends can soften. They always can. There is something comforting in knowing that your brain listens. Not to commands, but to consistency. Not to criticism, but to presence. When you pay gentle attention to something, the river leans toward it. When you rest, the river settles and reorganizes itself beneath the surface, like silt finding its place. You do not feel this happening the way you do not feel grass growing. But it is real all the same. A quiet calm spreads through your chest now, perhaps like warm water slowly filling a basin. The room around you feels a little farther away. Sound softens. Edges blur slightly. This is not losing awareness. It is widening it. Tonight, you are not here to learn in the traditional sense. You are here to remember that learning never stopped. Your river has been flowing since before you had words. It flowed as you learned to move, to speak, to recognize faces. It flows now as you rest, as you breathe, as you listen. You are not separate from it. You are carried by it. There is nothing you need to hold on to. The river holds you. As this chapter begins to close, you may notice a sense of gentle curiosity drifting in, like mist above water. If the river can slowly reshape itself without effort, without urgency, what else might change simply by allowing time and kindness? You do not need to answer that now. The river continues either way, flowing quietly onward, already moving toward the next bend, where repetition and familiarity begin to shape the land in ways you have not yet noticed. You continue drifting, carried gently from where you were before. The river is still beneath you, still moving, still patient. Nothing has changed suddenly, and that is the point. The river does not announce its work. It simply returns, again and again. Each time you come back to a thought, a movement, a feeling, the water brushes the same ground. Softly, repeatedly, without force. You breathe in, slow and easy. You breathe out, letting the breath wander off on its own. This is how paths form inside you. Not through intensity, not through effortful pushing, but through quiet familiarity. The brain responds to what you revisit, the way a river responds to gravity. It does not argue. It does not resist. It follows what feels natural. Neuroplasticity at its heart is this simple. When something happens again, the brain recognizes it. When it happens gently and often, the river deepens its course. The path becomes smoother, easier to travel, less noticeable even. You are learning right now whether you intend to or not. Your mind is very good at this. It has been practicing for your entire life. Every skill you carry arrived this way. Walking, speaking, recognizing the sound of someone you love entering a room. None of these were forced. They formed through return. The river remembers where it has been. You might notice a small softness in your face now, as if the muscles there have decided they can rest. Even that is a learned path. Relaxation, too, is something the river can remember. When scientists talk about connections in the brain, they often use language that sounds mechanical. Wires, circuits, signals. Tonight, you are invited to replace those images with something warmer. Picture water finding a low place in the land. Picture how it returns there, not because it is told to, but because it feels right. Each return leaves a trace, not a scar, a memory. You do not need to try to remember anything specific. The river handles that on its own. Sometimes you may feel like learning requires focus, effort, concentration held tightly in the hands. But the river teaches a different lesson. Learning also happens when attention is soft, when curiosity is light, when repetition occurs without tension. Your breath becomes a tide now. Each cycle mirrors the way the brain learns. A small motion repeated. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. If your thoughts drift, that is part of the process. Drift is movement. Drift is return. Even when you wander, you eventually circle back, and the path grows familiar. There is something gently humorous about this. The mind trying to be serious about rest. The river smiling quietly at the effort. It has been doing this long before instructions existed. Some paths in the brain are deep because they have been traveled often. Others are shallow, barely visible. Neither is good or bad. They simply reflect where the river has spent its time. And here is the comforting part. Paths can change without struggle. When the river begins to return somewhere new, Even softly, the land responds. You do not have to erase old paths. You do not have to fight them. When water flows elsewhere, old routes grow quiet on their own. This is why learning something new can feel strange at first. The river is exploring. It does not yet know the ground. But with each gentle return, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. The unfamiliar becomes home. You may feel a sense of reassurance settling into your chest now, like warmth spreading slowly. That warmth is not excitement. It is safety. The river learns best when it feels safe. Pressure narrows the flow. Ease widens it. You are allowed to learn slowly. You are allowed to repeat without judgment. The brain does not become bored by repetition. It becomes fluent. Even now, as you listen to these words, the rhythm of them is forming a path. The pauses, the softness, the way your breath responds. This too is learning. You are not behind. You are not inefficient. You are simply flowing at the speed rivers choose. There may be moments when you feel like nothing is happening. That is usually when something is settling. Rivers do their deepest work beneath the surface. You return again to the image of water meeting land. Each time it touches the same place, the edge smooths, resistance fades, movement becomes easier. Neurons behave the same way. When they meet often, they recognize each other. Communication becomes quiet, efficient, almost invisible. This is why habits form. Not because you force them, but because you return. Tonight you are returning to rest, to listening, to letting the river carry you without instruction. Your breathing slows further now, as if the body has learned this rhythm before. Because it has. You do not need to decide what you will learn next. The river will show you, based on where you gently place your attention tomorrow, or the next day, or not at all. Even rest is a return. Returning to stillness. Returning to quiet. Returning to the wide part of the river where nothing needs to be proven. As this chapter begins to soften toward its end, you may feel a small curiosity drifting by, like a leaf on the surface. If paths form simply through gentle return, what paths are already taking shape in you, unnoticed, forming quietly while you rest? You do not need to follow that question. The river will carry it forward, moving toward places where unused roads begin to fade, and quiet release waits just ahead. You arrive at a quieter place in the river now. The current slows. The water deepens. Nothing urges you forward. Here, the river moves gently past banks that once felt busy. Old paths lie nearby, barely visible now, softened by time. They are not broken. They are simply resting. You sense this without needing to think about it. Your body understands the feeling of something no longer required. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out, and the breath feels unburdened. Inside your mind, something similar is always happening. Paths that were once used often begin to fade when the river flows elsewhere. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just quietly, like grass returning to a trail when footsteps stop passing through. Neuroplasticity is not only about building new paths. It is also about allowing old ones to soften. This is not forgetting in the harsh sense. It is releasing, making space, letting the land rest. You may feel a gentle relief as this idea settles. Many people believe the brain holds on to everything forever, cluttered and crowded. But the river knows better. It keeps only what is needed for the present flow. And used roads do not disappear because they failed. They fade because they are no longer required. You might smile softly at this, or perhaps you simply breathe a little deeper. The idea lands where it needs to. The brain is constantly tending its landscape. When certain thoughts, reactions, or habits are no longer revisited, the connections between them loosen. Light filters in. Silence grows. The river does not mourn these paths. It simply adjusts. You imagine a narrow trail through a field, once worn smooth by repetition. Over time, wind moves seeds across it. Rain settles dust. Green returns. What once felt permanent becomes part of the background again. This is how change often feels from the inside. Not like transformation, more like quiet relief. You are allowed to let go without making a decision about it. You are allowed to change without announcing it to yourself. The river handles these transitions on its own. As you rest here, you may notice the sound around you becoming softer. Perhaps the room feels more distant. The weight of the day loosens its grip. This is the mind creating space not by effort but by absence of pressure. The science behind this is gentle. When certain neural paths are not reinforced, they gradually weaken. They do not vanish instantly. They simply stop being the default route. Other paths become easier to follow, without needing to fight the old ones. You do not need to push anything away. The river does not push old paths out of existence. It just stops visiting them. This is why change can feel confusing sometimes. You notice you are no longer reacting the way you used to, and you wonder when that happened. It happened gradually. It happened while you were living. There is comfort in knowing that the mind does not cling unnecessarily. It prefers efficiency, prefers ease, prefers space. You breathe in again, feeling the chest rise gently. You breathe out, and something inside settles. Some of the things you have outgrown may still appear from time to time, like faint outlines in the landscape. That is okay. Old paths do not demand attention. They simply exist quietly until the river chooses otherwise. There is no need to judge them. They once served a purpose. The river honors that by letting them rest. You might feel a sense of kindness toward yourself now, toward earlier versions of you who walked those paths often because they needed to. There is no need to revisit them tonight. Here, the river pools slightly, becoming still enough to reflect the sky. Reflection does not require analysis. It simply shows what is there. The brain, too, uses moments of stillness to reorganize itself. When activity slows, when input softens, and used connections loosen further. Silence does some of the work that effort cannot. This is why rest matters. Not because it adds something, but because it allows things to fall away. You do not need to remember everything you have ever been. You only need what supports the current flow. There is something gently humorous in this, if you notice it. The mind trying to hold onto every detail, while the river calmly lets go. The river has always been better at this. As you rest, your breathing becomes almost automatic. You no longer need to guide it. The body knows what to do when given permission. Each breath is a small release. Each pause between breaths is a reminder that nothing needs to be filled immediately. Neuroplasticity works in these pauses, in the spaces between doing, in the moments when nothing is reinforced. You are not losing parts of yourself. You are creating room. The river begins to move again now, slowly leaving this quiet pool. It does not rush, carries less weight than before. Some sediment has settled. The water feels clearer. As it flows onward, it leaves behind what no longer needs to travel with it. There is no ceremony, no announcement, just continuation. You may notice a lightness in your limbs, as if they are resting more deeply. The mind follows the river's lead. Ahead, the river curves gently toward familiarity, toward the idea that learning is not a climb, but a return, a returning motion that feels natural and kind. You do not need to hurry toward that bend. The river will arrive when it arrives, carrying you with it, unburdened, flowing easily into the comfort of gentle return. You drift forward with the river, and something feels familiar here, not identical but known, like returning to a place you have visited before, even if you cannot remember when. The river curves gently, and the water seems to recognize its own path. It does not hurry. It does not hesitate. It moves as if it has always been here because in some way it has. This is what learning often feels like from the inside. Not like reaching upward, but like coming back. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out and the body follows. Many people imagine learning as effort stacked on effort, like climbing steps that grow steeper with each attempt. But the river teaches something softer. Learning is a return to a motion already begun. Each time you practice, you are not starting over. You are re-entering the flow where it last carried you. The brain remembers this flow. It recognizes the bend. It responds with familiarity. Neuroplasticity works through this returning motion. When you revisit a skill, even gently, the river does not need to carve from scratch. The land is already shaped. The water simply smooths it further, making the journey easier each time. You may feel a sense of ease in this idea, like shoulders settling lower. The pressure to perform loosens. The river does not expect perfection. It responds to presence. Every skill you have ever learned arrived this way. Each repetition was a return. Each pause allowed the river to settle. Over time, what once required attention became natural, almost invisible. You did not notice the moment it happened. Rivers rarely announce change. As you rest here, your breathing finds a rhythm that feels steady and kind. The inhale arrives without effort. The exhale drifts away, leaving space behind. This rhythm mirrors how the brain learns best. Not in bursts of intensity, but in cycles. Movement, pause, return. When you repeat something gently, the river recognizes the path and flows more smoothly. When you rest, the banks adjust, reinforcing what matters and softening what does not. This is why progress often feels invisible. The work happens beneath the surface. You only notice it later, when the water moves more easily than before. You might feel a quiet reassurance spreading now. You do not need to rush learning. You do not need to master anything tonight. Simply returning is enough. The river does not measure its success by distance. It measures by continuity. You imagine small ripples spreading across the water's surface. These ripples are tiny skills, a new habit, a repeated motion, a familiar sound. Each ripple seems insignificant on its own, yet together they subtly change the flow. Motor skills form this way. Languages, too. Creative expression. Each return leaves a trace, like a soft echo in the water. The brain welcomes these echoes. It listens for what comes back. You breathe in again, feeling warmth move through the chest. You breathe out, and the warmth remains. There is something gently comforting about knowing that learning does not demand strain. The river resists force. It opens to patience. When you practice something without tension, the brain stays receptive. Connections grow not because they are pushed, but because they are welcomed. This is why kindness toward yourself matters. The river flows best when it feels safe. If you have ever felt discouraged by slow progress, you are invited to see it differently now. Slow progress is still progress. It is the kind that lasts. The river does not rush to the ocean. It enjoys each bend along the way. Even when you step away from practice, learning continues quietly. The brain replays. It integrates. It strengthens familiar paths while you are busy living. This is not something you need to manage. It happens naturally, like water settling after movement. You may notice your eyelids growing heavier now, or your body sinking more comfortably into rest. That is not a distraction. It is part of the process. Learning and rest are not opposites. They are partners. In moments of calm, the river becomes clearer. The mind organizes itself without interference. There is a gentle humor in this. So much effort spent trying to force learning, when the river simply wants consistency and care. It does not respond to urgency. It responds to return. You are allowed to revisit things slowly. You are allowed to circle back as many times as needed. The river never complains about repetition. Each return deepens familiarity. Each familiar moment becomes a resting place. You feel the rhythm now, like waves arriving and receding. This rhythm carries learning forward without pressure. It makes space for curiosity to arise naturally. Sometimes curiosity feels like excitement. Other times it feels like quiet interest. Both are welcomed by the river. You do not need to chase progress. It will meet you where you return. The science behind this is simple and kind. Repetition strengthens connections. Rest stabilizes them. Together they create ease. You are not behind if something still feels unfamiliar. You are simply approaching the bend again, allowing the river to recognize it once more. Even now, your brain is adjusting to this rhythm. The pace, the tone, the softness. This too is a return. As this chapter begins to draw toward its close, you may sense the river preparing to slow further. Ahead lies a quieter stretch, where rest becomes the main guide. The water darkens slightly, like evening light settling over its surface. Nothing disappears. It simply becomes softer. You do not need to follow the river intentionally. It knows where to go next. It flows gently onward, carrying you toward a place where stillness shapes the land, and rest becomes the space where change finally settles. The river slows as you enter a quieter stretch now. The water widens. The current softens. Nothing is asking you to move. You feel this change in your body before you think about it. Muscles loosen slightly. Breathing becomes rounder, fuller, like the air itself has decided to help you. This is where the river does some of its most important work. Not while rushing forward, but while settling. Rest is not an absence of activity. It is a different kind of movement. Beneath the calm surface, the river gently rearranges itself. Sediment drifts into place. Banks soften. The water finds balance without instruction. Your brain behaves the same way. When you rest, when you pause, when you allow stillness, the mind begins to organize what it has gathered. Experiences find their place. Familiar paths strengthen quietly, and used ones continue to fade. Nothing is forced. Nothing is hurried. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out, and the breath feels heavier now, more grounded. There is a widespread belief that change requires effort, that progress only comes from doing more. The river teaches something kinder. Some change can only happen when you stop trying. Neuroplasticity responds deeply to rest. During quiet moments, the brain revisits what it has encountered, replaying gently, refining softly. It does this best when you are not watching. You do not need to stay alert for this to happen. The river prefers privacy. As the light in your inner landscape dims, the water reflects less detail. Edges blur. This is not loss. It is integration. The river no longer needs to see every stone to know where it is going. You may feel a comforting heaviness now, like a warm blanket settling over you. The body recognizes rest as safety. When safety arrives, the river relaxes. This is why sleep matters. Not as a reward, but as a necessity. Sleep is when the river fully settles, redistributing its flow for the next day, the next movement, the next gentle return. You are not wasting time by resting. You are allowing time to work. There is something quietly reassuring in this. The pressure to improve dissolves. The need to manage disappears. The river does what it has always done, given the space. You might notice your thoughts becoming less distinct now. Instead of clear sentences, they may arrive as impressions, images, or feelings. This is the mind shifting into a different mode, one that values connection over clarity. The science here is subtle and kind. During rest, the brain strengthens useful patterns and releases excess noise. It is like a river choosing which currents to deepen, based on where it has flowed most gently. You do not need to understand this process. Participation is enough. You breathe in again, feeling warmth spread through your chest. You breathe out, and the warmth remains, pooling softly. Rest also brings perspective. When movement slows, the river sees itself more clearly. Without urgency, without demand, it simply exists. This is why moments of stillness often bring unexpected insight. Not because you searched for it, but because the river had space to reflect. There is a quiet humor here if you notice it. All that effort spent trying to force clarity, when clarity prefers a nap. The river smiles at this. It has always known. As you rest, the room around you feels farther away. Sounds soften. Even the sound of your own breath becomes gentler, like waves touching shore without intention. You are allowed to sink into this feeling. Nothing needs to be maintained. The brain responds to this permission. When vigilance fades, learning settles more deeply. Changes made earlier find stability here, anchoring themselves without noise. You are not falling behind while you rest. You are catching up to yourself. The river's surface darkens slightly now, like evening arriving. The light is still there, just muted. This is the time when reflection deepens, when the water carries the day inward. You may feel your eyelids growing heavier. That is not something to resist. It is a sign that the river is ready to settle further. In this state, the brain becomes especially receptive to gentle patterns. Rhythm, repetition, calm voices. These signals tell the river it is safe to deepen its course. You are giving it exactly what it needs. Breath moves slowly now. Each cycle carries you deeper into rest. Each pause between breaths is a moment where nothing is required. Change happens in these pauses. You do not need to plan tomorrow. You do not need to review today. The river holds everything that matters. There is comfort in knowing that even while you sleep, the river continues its quiet work. It strengthens what you return to gently. It releases what you did not need. Prepares you for what comes next without asking. As this chapter begins to fade, you sense the river settling fully into night. The water is calm. The surface reflects only darkness and faint light. Ahead, something subtle waits. Emotion, warmth, and feeling begin to influence the flow more clearly. The temperature of the river starts to matter. You do not need to go there yet. For now, you rest, floating easily, as dusk settles over the water, and the river carries you softly toward the gentle warmth waiting just beyond the dark. The river continues through the night, and you sense a subtle change. Not in speed, not in direction, but in feeling. The water feels warmer now, as if sunlight once touched it and left something behind. This warmth does not rush the river forward. It simply makes the flow more open, more willing to move. You feel this warmth in yourself too, spreading gently through the chest, loosening places that once felt tight. Emotion moves through the mind like temperature moves through water. It does not control the river, but it influences how easily it flows. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out, and the breath carries warmth with it. For a long time, emotion was treated as something separate from learning, as if feeling and understanding lived in different worlds. The river knows better. Feeling shapes the flow. When the water is warm, it widens. When it is cold, it narrows. Warmth invites movement. Cold asks the river to conserve. You may recognize this in your own experience. When you feel safe, curious, gently interested, learning happens almost on its own. When tension creeps in, the river tightens, protecting itself, choosing familiar paths. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. The brain responds to emotion the way water responds to climate. Not with judgment, but with adaptation. When the environment feels welcoming, connections grow easily. When it feels harsh, the river slows, conserving energy. You are not meant to learn under pressure. You are meant to learn under care. As you rest here, you may notice memories drifting by that carry different emotional tones. Some feel warm and open. Others feel cooler, distant. The river holds them all, but it flows differently through each. Positive emotion does not need to be loud to be effective. It can be as subtle as a sense of ease. Faint smile, a softening behind the eyes. These signals tell the river it is safe to explore. You do not need to force happiness. The river does not ask for that. It responds to kindness even in small amounts. You breathe in again, feeling the air enter gently. You breathe out, letting the body soften further. Stress, when it appears, is like a sudden chill. The river does not stop, but it pulls inward, choosing the deepest, most familiar channels. This is not failure. It is protection. You are not broken when learning feels harder under pressure. You are responding exactly as a river would. There is something comforting in this understanding. It removes blame. It replaces self-criticism with curiosity. The brain learns best when the emotional climate is warm enough to allow movement and calm enough to allow rest. This balance happens naturally when you treat yourself gently. Kindness toward yourself is not indulgence. It is infrastructure. When you speak to yourself with patience, the river widens. When you allow mistakes without harsh reaction, the water flows into new areas. When you rest without guilt, warmth spreads through the system. You may feel a gentle reassurance settling in now, like a heated stone resting against the body. The river responds to this reassurance by relaxing its banks. There is a quiet humor here if you notice it. The mind often tries to improve by being strict, when improvement prefers softness. The river has always known this. Emotion also colors memory. Experiences paired with warmth are easier for the river to revisit. They feel inviting. Experiences paired with tension become narrow crossings, visited only when necessary. This is why joy, curiosity, and calm interest deepen learning without effort. They make the water pleasant to travel. You do not need to generate strong emotion for this to work. Even neutrality can be warm enough. Even quiet acceptance widens the flow. As your breathing continues to slow, you may notice the temperature inside your body evening out. Not hot, not cold, just comfortable. This is where the river likes to be. In this state, learning happens without announcement. Connections form quietly. Familiar paths deepen. New ones become possible. You are not required to feel a certain way. The river adjusts to what is present. But when warmth appears, even briefly, it leaves an impression. You imagine moonlight touching the surface of the water, not heating it, just softening it. Emotion can work like that. Subtle, gentle, effective. You may feel a sense of trust emerging now. Trust in your own ability to learn. Trust in the process unfolding without force. Trust in the river to find its way. Breath moves easily now. Each cycle maintains the warmth. Each pause allows it to settle deeper. The science behind this is simple and kind. The brain opens when it feels safe. It closes when it needs to protect. You do not need to override this. You only need to notice it. When you create moments of comfort, learning follows naturally. When you allow yourself to rest in warmth, change becomes easier to hold. You are not required to be motivated. You are not required to be excited. You are simply allowed to be at ease. The river flows best when it is not fighting its own temperature. As this chapter begins to soften toward its end, you may sense the warmth lingering, even as the night deepens. The water remains open, receptive, calm. Ahead, the river continues into a stretch where time itself feels different. Seasons replace schedules. Age becomes another texture in the landscape. You do not need to think about that yet. For now, you remain here, floating in warm water, carried by a river that responds to kindness, remembers safety, and moves gently onward toward a place where time loosens its grip and the flow continues, at every age without end. The river continues onward, and time begins to feel different here. Not faster, not slower, just wider. You notice that the river does not measure itself in hours or years. It moves through seasons instead. Cool mornings, warm afternoons, long evenings, quiet nights. Each season leaves its mark, not as damage, but as character. This is how the brain moves through life. For a long time, many people believed that the river hardened with age, that its banks became fixed, that change belonged only to the young. But rivers do not stop flowing because they have traveled far. They learn the land better. Your brain is no different. Neuroplasticity does not retire. It does not fade out quietly when a certain number is reached. It continues, adapting its pace, its curves, its depth, responding to experience as long as the river flows. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out, and the breath feels patient. Age does not close the river. It reshapes it. Earlier in life, the water may rush, exploring quickly, carving new paths with ease. Later, it may move more deliberately, choosing carefully where to flow. Both movements are forms of learning. There is no single correct speed. You may feel a sense of relief here, as if a quiet fear has loosened its grip. The fear of being too late, too old, too set. The river releases these worries easily. They were never part of its language. The brain at every age continues to respond to repetition, rest, emotion, and care. These principles do not expire. They simply express themselves differently over time. You imagine the river flowing through different landscapes. Early on, it moves through open plains wide and curious. Later, it winds through valleys guided by experience. Still later, it flows calmly, carrying depth rather than speed. Each stage is valuable. Each stage learns. There is something comforting about this image. It replaces urgency with trust. You do not need to race the river. You are already moving with it. The idea of too late often comes from comparing rivers. One seems faster, another wider, another deeper. But rivers are not in competition. They are shaped by their own terrain. Your terrain is unique. You breathe again, noticing how the body rests more easily now. The chest rises gently. The exhale lingers. Learning later in life often feels different because it is layered. New experiences connect to a richer landscape. The river does not forget where it has been. It integrates. This is why understanding can feel deeper, even if it feels slower. The river carries more context now, more memory, more nuance. You are not losing the ability to change. You are gaining the ability to choose where change matters. Neuroplasticity continues quietly, strengthening paths you return to, softening those you leave behind. This happens whether you are learning a new skill, adjusting to a new routine, or simply resting into a different way of being. You do not need to label these changes as improvement. They are adaptation. The river responding to what is present. There is a gentle humor here if you notice it. The idea that the brain suddenly decides to stop learning at some invisible line, while the rest of the body continues adapting without question. The river smiles at this misunderstanding. It has never stopped listening. As you rest, you may feel a sense of spaciousness open up, like standing near a wide bend in the water. Time feels less sharp here, more forgiving. Seasons replace schedules. Growth replaces deadlines. The brain responds well to this shift. When pressure lifts, curiosity returns naturally. Learning becomes something you move toward, not something you chase. You do not need to reclaim youth to change. You only need presence. Even now, your brain is responding to this rhythm. The calm pacing, the steady tone, the absence of urgency. This is learning, too. You breathe in again, feeling the air cool and clean. You breathe out, and the body sinks deeper into comfort. Age also brings gentler forms of plasticity, emotional regulation, perspective, the ability to let things pass without gripping them. These are changes the river makes over time, refining its flow. You are not meant to learn everything quickly. You are meant to learn what fits. The river does not regret its earlier paths, carries them forward as depth, as memory, as wisdom. There is no moment when the river stops reshaping its banks. Even subtle shifts matter. Even quiet adjustments count. This understanding brings softness. You do not need to hurry into becoming anything else. You are already becoming at the pace that suits you. The brain continues adapting while you sleep, while you rest, while you repeat small actions gently. These changes accumulate like sediment, slowly altering the river's course. You do not feel them happening. That is part of their strength. You may notice now that your thoughts feel slower, less demanding. This is the river widening again, making room. There is comfort in knowing that learning is not a phase you missed. It is a process you are still inside. You are allowed to begin again at any point. You are allowed to take your time. The river has all the time it needs. As this chapter begins to close, the river moves into another stretch of night. The water remains steady, confident in its direction. Ahead, something smaller waits. Tiny movements, subtle shifts, the power of small skills shaping deep change. You do not need to seek it out. The river will carry you there naturally, flowing onward through seasons without urgency, adapting with grace, continuing to learn, at every age, without ever needing to stop. The river narrows slightly here, not from pressure, but from focus. The water moves with quiet intention. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet, everything changes. You sense it immediately. The smallest movements now matter more. Tiny ripples touch the surface, spreading outward, barely noticeable at first. This part of the river is shaped not by floods or storms, but by steady, repeated motion. The kind that happens without fanfare. You breathe in gently. You breathe out, letting the breath land softly. Small skills live here. A subtle adjustment in posture. A habit repeated without effort. A moment of attention returned to again and again. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet invitations. And the river responds. Neuroplasticity listens closely to what is repeated, no matter how small. The brain does not require big changes to adapt. It notices consistency. It notices return. Each time you repeat a tiny action, the water brushes the same edge of land. Over time, the edge softens. You may remember moments when a small change seemed insignificant, almost laughable. Drinking water first thing in the morning. Taking a slow breath before responding. Placing an object in the same place each day. First, nothing seems different. Then one day you realize the river has shifted. The brain loves small skills because they are safe. They do not overwhelm. They do not demand. They slip beneath resistance and settle where effort cannot. You feel this safety now, perhaps as a gentle calm in the chest. When change is small, the river does not tense. It remains open. You breathe again, slow and steady. Incremental change is not about speed. It is about direction. Even the slightest turn, repeated often, can redirect the entire flow over time. The river understands this deeply. Each ripple, though small, overlaps with the next. Together, they create movement. This is how habits form. Not through willpower, but through repetition that feels almost invisible. You are not meant to notice every change as it happens. If you did, the river would tighten. Instead, change works best when it passes quietly through awareness. There is a soft humor in this if you catch it. The mind often searches for breakthroughs, while the river prefers gentle persistence. It smiles at the idea of instant transformation. Small skills do not ask for attention. They simply show up again. The science here is kind and patient. Each time a behavior repeats, neural paths respond. They strengthen slightly, not enough to feel dramatic, just enough to matter later. This is why tiny routines become powerful. They bypass pressure. They allow learning to happen without fear. You might feel a sense of trust building now. Trust that you do not need to overhaul yourself to change. You only need to allow small movements to continue. The river does not leap to new directions. Curves. You imagine a pebble dropped into the water. The ripples move outward, touching places far from the point of entry. Small skills work the same way. A minor change in one area influences many others. Calm breath affects mood. A consistent routine affects confidence. A gentle habit affects identity. You are not forcing any of this. The river does the work once you allow the ripple. Your body feels heavier now, more settled. The breath moves on its own. This is the state where small changes integrate best. You are not required to measure progress. The river does not count ripples. There is comfort in knowing that subtlety is enough. That change does not need to announce itself to be real. Sometimes the most profound shifts happen while you are not paying attention at all. You breathe again, noticing the rhythm deepen. This rhythm itself is a small skill. Repeated breathing patterns teach the body safety. Over time, the nervous system responds more quickly to calm than to tension. This is learning, too. You may feel a gentle pride arise, or perhaps just a sense of quiet satisfaction. Even rest is a skill practiced slowly. The river welcomes these moments. It does not demand perfection. It only notices what returns. If you ever feel discouraged by how small your efforts seem, remember this stretch of the river. Remember how narrow curves can redirect entire landscapes. You are not behind. You are shaping the flow in ways you cannot yet see. Neuroplasticity thrives here, in the territory of small steps. The brain adjusts efficiently when changes are manageable. Large disruptions create turbulence. Small ripples create harmony. You are learning how to work with the river, not against it. As the water continues forward, it carries the accumulated effect of countless tiny movements. Each one left a mark. Each one mattered. You feel steadier now, more grounded. The river flows confidently, shaped by repetition, not force. Ahead, the river begins to slow again. The surface grows smooth. Sound fades further. Something quieter waits. Attention itself becomes the focus. Awareness deepens. Silence begins to feel active. You do not need to go there yet. For now, you float easily, trusting the power of subtle shifts, knowing that small skills are already reshaping the river beneath you, carrying you gently toward a place where stillness and silence meet, and the river listens to itself once more. The river enters a place where sound begins to fade. Not suddenly, not completely, just enough. Here, the water does not rush forward. It gathers. It settles into wide, quiet pools where movement is subtle and deep. You feel this shift in yourself as well, as if something inside has decided it no longer needs to speak. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out, and the breath dissolves into silence. Silence is not empty here. It is full of awareness, full of space. The river does not stop when it becomes quiet. It listens. This is where attention lives. When you rest your awareness gently on the present moment, the river responds. Not by speeding up, not by changing direction, but by becoming clearer. The surface smooths, reflections sharpen. What was once hidden beneath ripples becomes visible without effort. Neuroplasticity responds to this kind of still attention. When you are present without trying to change anything, the brain enters a receptive state. Connections reorganize themselves quietly, guided by awareness rather than action. You do not need to concentrate hard. In fact, the river prefers softness. You notice sensations now. The weight of your body resting, the warmth of the air against your skin, the subtle movement of breath. These sensations anchor you gently, like stones resting at the bottom of the pool. There is no need to name them. Awareness alone is enough. When the mind grows quiet, learning does not stop. It changes form. Instead of shaping new paths through repetition, the river refines what already exists. It smooths rough edges. It integrates. This is why moments of mindfulness feel different from effort. They do not add anything. They allow things to align. You may feel time stretch here, becoming less defined. Seconds lose their edges. The river does not keep track of minutes. There is a gentle humor in this if you notice it. The mind often believes it must do something to be useful, while the river accomplishes its most delicate work in stillness. You breathe again, barely noticing the inhale. You breathe out, and the space between thoughts widens. Attention is like moonlight touching the water. It does not disturb the surface. It simply illuminates it. In this light, you may notice thoughts arise and fade without pulling you along. They drift like reflections, not demands. The river does not chase them. It allows them to pass. This is presence. The science here is subtle and compassionate. When attention rests without judgment, the brain's activity softens. Patterns synchronize. Communication becomes quieter, more efficient. You are not watching this happen. You are inside it. Silence gives the river a chance to hear itself. Without noise, it senses its own direction. Without urgency, it trusts its own movement. You may feel a sense of calm deepen now, like sinking gently into warm water. Muscles relax further. The jaw softens. The space behind the eyes opens. Nothing is required of you. Mindfulness is not a technique here. It is simply noticing what is already present. Breath, body, stillness. The river responds by becoming whole. When awareness is gentle, the brain learns safety. Safety allows change to settle. It allows new patterns to stabilize without interference. This is why silence matters. Not as absence, but as environment. You may notice that emotions feel quieter here, less sharp. They do not disappear. They soften. They float, like leaves resting on still water. This is not detachment. It is clarity. You are not distancing yourself from experience. You are meeting it without disturbance. The river listens. As you rest in this quiet, the brain organizes itself without instruction. Familiar paths align. Small changes integrate fully. What was learned earlier finds its place. This is where learning becomes part of you. You breathe slowly now, almost imperceptibly. Each breath confirms that you are here, that this moment is enough. Silence also allows compassion to arise naturally. Without noise, there is space for gentleness. Toward yourself, toward your thoughts, toward the river itself. You do not need to correct anything. The river does not judge its reflections. You may feel a sense of wholeness now, as if separate pieces have settled into alignment. This is integration. It happens best when nothing is being pushed. Neuroplasticity is active here, in the quiet. The brain refines its flow based on presence alone. Attention tells it what matters without words. You are teaching your brain simply by noticing. This noticing is light, effortless. It feels almost like drifting. If thoughts arise, you allow them. If they fade, you allow that too. The river accepts both movement and stillness. There is something deeply reassuring about this. You do not need to manage your mind. You only need to be with it. Silence becomes a companion now, not something to fill. It holds you steady and calm. You feel yourself sinking deeper into rest, as if the river has carried you into a sheltered inlet, protected from currents and noise. Here, learning and being are the same thing. As this chapter begins to soften toward its end, the silence remains, but something else approaches gently. A sense of continuation. The understanding that even as you drift further into rest, the river does not stop. It flows through the night, carries learning into sleep, continues without you watching. You do not need to follow it. The river will carry you forward, quietly leaving this still pool behind, moving into darkness where awareness loosens its grip and drifting begins. Effortless, unobserved. As the river continues on, even as you sleep, the river carries you deeper now, and you no longer need to watch it. It flows whether you notice or not, continues whether you are awake or asleep. You feel this letting go in your body first. The weight you have been holding loosens. Muscles soften without instruction. Breathing slows to a rhythm so gentle it almost disappears. You are not drifting away from anything. You are drifting into something steady and familiar. The river does not need supervision. As you move closer to sleep, the edges of thought blur further. Ideas no longer form full shapes. They arrive as impressions, like reflections on dark water. This is where the river does its quietest, deepest work. Even now, learning continues. Neuroplasticity does not pause when awareness fades. It thrives in this state. During sleep and deep rest, the river integrates everything it has encountered. Paths that were gently returned to strengthen further. Changes that were small settle fully into place. You do not feel this happening. You are not meant to. The river works best when you stop watching. You breathe in, barely noticing it. You breathe out, and the breath seems to dissolve into the night. All the elements you have met along the way gather here. Repetition, rest, emotion, tension, kindness. They no longer feel separate. They move together as one flow. This is how lasting change happens. Not through effort, but through alignment. You may sense a deep calm spreading now, like warmth reaching the center of your body. Thoughts slow further. The sense of self softens. You are still here, but less defined. Like the river at night, you become part of the landscape rather than something moving through it. There is no task remaining. The river remembers everything it needs. Sleep is not an end to learning. It is a continuation in a different language. During sleep, the brain revisits experiences gently, without emotion or urgency. Keeps what fits. It releases what does not. This process feels invisible, but it is powerful. You are not required to improve overnight. You are simply allowing the river to finish its work. There is something quietly reassuring about this. You do not need to wake up different. You do not need to wake up changed. Change unfolds on its own timeline. The river is patient beyond measure. As you drift, you may feel a sense of safety deepen, like being held by something that does not require explanation. This safety tells the brain it can relax fully. When the brain relaxes, learning settles more deeply. Nothing is forced. Nothing is rushed. You have done enough by arriving here. The mind often wants closure, a final lesson, a clear takeaway. The river offers something softer. Continuation. Flow without conclusion. You do not need a final thought. You breathe again, slower than before. Each breath is quieter than the last. The river flows through the dark now, guided by terrain it knows intimately. It does not need light to move forward. It has been here before. All the changes you have allowed tonight move with it. They are not dramatic. They are woven in. This is how learning becomes part of you, not as something remembered, but as something lived. You may feel yourself slipping further now, towards sleep or deep rest. Sounds fade. Sensation softens. The boundary between listening and dreaming begins to blur. You do not need to hold onto these words. They will dissolve naturally, like ripples smoothing back into still water. The river does not cling to ripples. Even as consciousness loosens, the brain remains active in gentle ways. It strengthens patterns that feel safe and familiar. It integrates calm. It remembers kindness. You are teaching your brain how to rest. This may be the most important lesson of all. There is a soft humor here if you could notice it. All this learning happening while you do nothing at all. The river has always preferred it this way. You feel heavy now in the best sense. Supported. Grounded. As if the surface beneath you is holding you completely. You do not need to move. The river flows on, deeper into the night, carrying everything forward without effort. It will continue while you sleep. It will continue when you wake. It will continue even when you forget this moment. That is its nature. You are not separate from this flow. You never were. As awareness dims further, there is no final instruction, no summary, no ending to reach. The river does not stop at conclusions. It moves endlessly, reshaping gently, adapting quietly. You are allowed to let go entirely now. Breath slows, thought fades, stillness holds. The river continues.